And this is my favorite workshop, because by the end of the 90 minutes that we have together, you guys are actually going to have something built out that you can then use. And as we did in the last class, I wanted to kind of follow suit. I know I wasn't there, but I know that you all worked on business process mapping and making sure that we're thinking about all the different steps that are going to be involved when we build out our workflow or we build out this automation. So as Zaya was mentioning, today we're going to build out an email notification workflow. The way I've done this, it's a little bit different than the email or the gift notification that's available on the website, which I think I talked about in the first class. The way that one is set up is it is going through and it's notifying you for each individual gift that comes into the Raiser's Edge that meets a certain threshold, which is great if you're only entering a few gifts per day. But most of the customers that we work with are entering in gifts in batch, or they're importing them from a lockbox. And normally what they want to do is have that digest at the end of the day that says, okay, we've entered in all our gifts for the day. Go ahead and give me a report or a readout of all of those high value gifts or those high dollar amount gifts that we might want to see. So what I've done is with this workflow, I have the starting point or the trigger point being at on a cadence where every night at 11 p.m. it automatically starts this flow. And we'll walk through how we actually set up that trigger point. And once we start that flow, we are going to, normally what I like to do is initialize all my variables up front. So I create kind of a holding place for the notification content. That holding place is the log or that digest that actually has the line by line of each individual gift in there. So I set up that variable at the very top. That's what this first blue box is. And then I run a command that is pulling a list of gifts that were over $1,000 today. The way that I do that is I actually take it from a list that's already predefined in Raiser's Edge NXT in the web view. So we'll walk over what that looks like. And then the first thing I do before I do anything else is I want to do a quick check and say, hey, are there any gifts that came in today that qualify? Because if there aren't, then I can just go ahead and end the process. There's no use in spending any time doing anything else within this flow if there are no gifts that came in that meet this criteria. However, if there are, then we branch to this other direction that says, let's go ahead and look at each individual gift and start generating our notification content. We're going to start building upon this variable that we had initialized at the top. And then once we've built all of the different gifts into that variable, into that list, let's go ahead and shoot that email over to whoever the notification recipient is. And then once that email's been sent, it ends the process.
I just wanted to know, does this also, where does specific gift officers work into this process?
So the way that this is built is it is not built for specific gift officers. You can build a flow for each gift officer. There's certain things that you'd want to consider for that, because there might be some gift officers that want to receive this, some that don't. The way I've seen it done is that if you want to build one of these for each gift officer, you can have their own list that's specifically for gifts where they are getting credited for. And you can basically just copy this flow and just replace each of them with each individual gift officer's list. So that would be one way to do it. You could output this, the gift officer's name as part of the output and say, here's all the gifts that came in today that are over $5,000 or over $1,000. The name of the donor, the amount that they gave, the funds that they gave to, and who the solicitor is or who the gift officer is. That's an option as well. And then just kind of have one master flow that does all of that. All right. So the first thing I did, let me go into the Raiser's Edge, and I need to have my list that I'm going to use. So if I go under the list area, again, this is the web view, I'm going to go under GIFs and make sure that I have some GIFs that were entered today. Clearly I do. I've got a couple lists that are on here. I've got today's gift, which has a total of 6. And the only filter that I used for today's gifts is the gift date equals today. So what that's going to do is it's going to show me all of the gifts that came in today, and I can see all of them here with my outputs. But for this specific example, what I want to do is I only want to email my whoever's getting notified, my admin or my executive or whoever. I only want to email them about the gifts that are over a certain amount. So I created another list here called Class 3 Exercise Gift List. And if you look at this, it's the same gift date equals today filter, but I also added another filter that says the gift amount has to be greater than or equal to $1,000. So instead of emailing all 6 gifts, I should only be emailing these 3 gifts. Hopefully all of that makes sense if you've spent time in the web view building out lists in the past. It's basically your query tool in the web view. So let me go to my next screen. And this is just my home screen. If you go to flow.microsoft.com, it's going to open up Power Automate. You should see something that looks something similar to what I'm looking at right now. And when I want to create a brand new flow, I can go to my menu navigation over to the left-hand side, click on the Create button, and it's going to prompt you for what kind of flow are we going to be creating, right? Is this going to be triggered off of an event that happens in some system? Is it something that's going to be triggered manually, ad hoc with a button? What we're going to choose is this third option, which is a scheduled cloud flow. Basically, I want this flow to run on a cadence. And that cadence could be every minute, every hour, every day, every week, every month, whatever you want that cadence to be. In this particular example, I decided, I should say, that I wanted this flow to run every day at 11 p.m. So I'm going to choose this scheduled cloud flow. And the first thing it's going to ask me for is what's the name of the flow. I'm going to call this Class 3 Gift Notification. And I'm going to add that this is April 2021. The reason why I'm doing that is because I've already got like 5 of these in my database. You don't necessarily have to add April 2021, but this is the Class 3 Gifts Notification flow. So I want to make sure that I've got some sort of naming convention that I'm following, especially if you start to build more and more flows. You want to be able to easily access and identify what these flows are doing. So maybe part of your change management process, if you're starting to use Power Automate more and more, is to kind of come up amongst your organization a good naming convention for all of these flows that you're creating. I want to start this flow today, and rather than running it at 10 a.m., I'm going to push this down to 11 p.m. And then I want this to repeat every day. So not every minute, but every one day, this flow is going to run at 11 p.m. So it starts tonight, 11 p.m. It's going to repeat every day. And then I can go in and click Create. And the nice thing about this is that the trigger is already there. That recurrence, that first step of our flow is going to be when this actually gets triggered. So every night at 11 p.m., we are telling this to run. And so now all we have to do is start adding all those various steps that we have within our business process. So this is where I can start creating my variables. I can start grabbing data out of Raiser's Edge. I can start looping. I can start, building out my conditionals. And what I did in the first step of my process map was I kind of set up a variable. I set up a holding place so that when we get to a point where we're about to start adding Raiser's Edge data into a digest that we're going to be emailing, we have a place to actually put it. And this is just me personally. I like to put all of my variables, or at least start them at the very top. And that way I know exactly what I'm going to be using throughout the flow. So to do that, I'm going to add a new step here. And I'm just going to do a search. This search bar at the top is your friend, because you're going to be able to very quickly find exactly what you're trying to do. And this is, I think we talked at the very first day about all the different services that Power Automate supports. So if I'm looking for some sort of DocuSign workflow, I can start searching for DocuSign, and I can find what I'm looking for there. But then there's also some of those services that are just standard out of the box with Power Automate, like the ability to add variables. So if I just do a search for variable, notice that there's a variable component that I can click on. And the first thing that I want to do is, before I start using a variable, I need to initialize it. And so that digest that we're going to be inserting into our email notification needs to be initialized, and this is where I do it, is I always put it at the very beginning of my flow. So I'm going to click on initialize variable. It's going to ask me for the name of the variable that I'm going to initialize, and let's call it, I'm going to call it gift digest. It's going to ask me for a type, and this is all your various data structures that you can use for your variables. So Booleans are true, false, or yes, no. You've got your number variables. If it's a whole number, it's an integer. If it's got a decimal point, it's a float. If it's a text variable, just a short text variable, it's a string. You've got objects, which are like records. But what I'm going to use here is I'm going to use an array. An array is a list of items. And because there are probably going to be several GIFs, and in fact, we already know there's going to be several GIFs because I already looked in the Raiser's Edge, and I know that there's 3 GIFs that should display in my digest. I want to make sure that my array allows me to list out those 3 separate GIFs. So I'm choosing array here, and we'll see how we actually construct this a little bit later into the flow when we add that gift data into the array, or into the list variable that we're initializing here. The other thing I did not do, but I want to do right now before I get too far into this, is I want to start making this really easy to understand. So if I were to just look at this at a glance, I'm not sure what's happening so far. So I'm going to go back into the first step, and I'm going to click on the 3 dots, the little ellipse here, and I'm going to rename it. And instead of it saying recurrence, I'm just going to say every night at 11 p.m. And that way, I don't have to dig into the details of this step to understand that the trigger for this particular workflow happens every night at 11 p.m. Same thing here. Initialize variable doesn't really tell me much. So instead, I'm going to click on the ellipse and rename this. And instead of it saying initialize variable, I'm going to say maybe initialize, initialize our digest variable. And that makes it, again, just a little bit easier to understand what we're doing in each of these steps. Okay, so we haven't really done anything yet, except we basically earmarked a holding place to hold all that gift data once we retrieve it from the Raiser's Edge. So the next step would be, I go back to my business process map, is to actually go into Raiser's Edge and get that list of GIFs. So I'm going to add another new step in my flow. And this new step is going to be calling the Blackbaud Raiser's Edge connector. So I'm going to search for Blackbaud. And again, I think I talked about this in the first class. I've got 3 Blackbaud connectors. 2 of them are custom that I built myself. And then this first one is the certified Raiser's Edge connector. More than likely, you probably only see 1 Blackbaud connector. So obviously choose that one, but just keep that in mind as you're seeing me go through and add Blackbaud data into my flow, it's this first one that is the exact same connector that you guys have. So I'm going to choose the Blackbaud Raiser's Edge. And then scroll down a little bit, you're going to see all the different things that we can do to interact with our Raiser's Edge data. And because we're pulling a gift list, I'm going to type in the words list gift and do a search on that. And notice that there is an action that lists gifts, which is exactly what we want to do. We want the flow to return a listing of all those gifts that came in today. So I'm going to choose that one. Notice that you can also list gift attachments, you can list the custom fields, you can get a single gift if you wanted to. Lots of different options here, but I think for this particular flow, what I want to do is go ahead and list gifts. All right. So again, I'm going to go to my ellipse here and rename this and make sure that this is understandable. If I'm going to be coming back into this flow 6 months from now, I need to understand what exactly I'm pulling. So I'm going to say pull today's gifts. I didn't put an apostrophe in today's just because sometimes it doesn't like those weird characters. So I try to keep it just with standard numbers, letters, and spaces here. No weird punctuation. So you've got a couple different options to pull today's gifts. I can pull it from a list, a predefined list. So if I use this drop down, I should be able to find that list that I had created in the Raiser's Edge. And sure enough, the second one on here is class 3 exercise gifts list, which is exactly what I called it, class 3 exercise gift list. And that's what I would use here. But if I didn't want to use a list, going back to the previous question, what if we backdate our gift date? Probably wouldn't want to use this list. Instead, in fact, you could clear it out and just leave that blank. What you could do is if you go under advanced options, you've got even more fields that you can pull off of. And one of those fields is added on or after. So if I wanted all of the gifts that were added on or after, let's say the last 24 hours, you can go in and populate that field instead.
Yeah, the problem I've had with that is how do you make it dynamic so you don't have to put in each day?
That's a great question. So there's actually another action that we can use to kind of backdate 24 hours ago from whenever this is running. And so if I add another step right before where we pull it, notice I've got a plus sign if I hover over the arrow, and I'm going to add an action here. There is a date time function. I'm just going to search for date time. There it is, date time. I'm going to click on that, and I'm going to say get past time. So it's this, what is it, the 5th option down, get past time. And basically I'm going to say 24 hours ago or 1 day ago or 1 week ago, whatever interval that you want to use. In this case, I'm just using 24 hours. That's going to return the date and timestamp from 24 hours ago. So now when I go into the Raiser's Edge action and I go all the way down to added on or after, I can click within that field, and rather than hard coding a date and typing it in here, notice that there's a dynamic content flyout that pops up over to the right-hand side. And I'm going to scroll down. Notice that there is an input that we can get from the previous action that says past time. And that's basically taking whatever the outputs of this action is and putting it in as an input to the Raiser's Edge, to that list pull. Does that make sense?
Perfect. Thank you so much.
No problem.
I have a question real quick. So if you set up a gift list with sort of like a generic wide-ranging date field for like this calendar year, and then you use it in conjunction with this add-on or after, could you then limit the gift amount that you're reporting on, just looking for, say, gifts of $1,000 or more added in the last 24 hours?
So if I remember correctly, I think what we did is that if you have a list populated, it supersedes any of the other filters that you're putting in here. So you can either put a list into the list field, or you can use these other filters. So you could get to what you're asking for potentially using these other filters, where you say anything that was added this year, for example, on or after, you know, the beginning of this year, January 1st, and you could put a starting gift amount and an ending gift amount, a minimum and a maximum for what you're looking for. You can also use the gift date. We've included that as part of the action in here. You can filter based off of the campaign, the fund, and the appeal. And you can use commas if you've got multiple that you want to include. So there's different ways to do your filtering. It's just a matter of what's the easiest for you all. Is it to just use the standard front end list building tool, or do we want to use the predefined filters that are on the action in the flow? So I'm not going to use the date added. So I'm going to remove this, and I'm going to go back to using my class 3 gift list. So let me put that back in here. And I'm just going to quickly remove this date time function as well. But we'll talk more about dates and times in a few minutes. So kind of keep this in the back of your head as we continue. All right, so now we've gotten our list of gifts. So what we can now do is we can, if I go back into my process map, the next thing was basically to look at and evaluate, is there anything in that list? Is that list, does it have more than one item, one or more items? So, so to do that, I would want to create a condition. And I think we looked at this maybe a little bit last week when you were working with Jim about, you know, does this constituent exist? If we do a search and it doesn't find anyone, what do you want it to do? Same sort of thing here. When we get today's gifts, I can add a new step, which is a conditional. So let me do that. And if I type in the word condition, you're going to notice that under actions, there it is. It's that first thing. It's actually a control type of action. So I'm going to click on condition, and it's going to ask me, what do I want to evaluate? And if I click choose a value, I want to evaluate what's coming out of this pull of today's gifts. And when I click on it, again, notice what happens. I've got this list of dynamic content, and under pull today's gifts, there's a count that it returns. And I'm going to use that count to determine whether or not we are pulling multiple gifts or if it doesn't pull anything. So I'm going to change this to the count is greater than or equal to 1. Means there has to be at least one gift in there in order for us to proceed. And now it's branching between if there is more than one gift or more. If yes, what do you want it to do? If there aren't any gifts in there, so in other words, if there are 0 gifts in that list, do you want it to do anything? Sometimes we talk to organizations and they want to at least get a notification that no large gifts came in today. That means that even on holidays and weekends, you're going to get an email that says no large gifts were entered today, or no large gifts came in that have a gift date of today. So just to kind of walk through that scenario, I'm just going to quickly add an action. That action is an email action. I like to use the Outlook connector to send emails from Power Automate, but there's also a mail function that you can use. Not as powerful, but if you don't have Outlook, you can certainly use it. For the purposes of this course, I'll just be using Outlook because it's got a lot of cool features that you can use, like the ability to do attachments. You can set the importance. You can CC and BCC people. So there's a lot of benefits to using the Outlook connector. So I'm going to do a search for the Outlook connector. And here it is, Office 365 Outlook. I'm going to use that. And then the action that I'm going to do is send an email. So let me choose that option. And then the only thing the email is going to say is that there were no gifts that came in today. So I'll just say gifts. There were today that meet your $1,000 threshold. Basically, our list came back with 0 gifts that met it. So this is just an email notification letting them know. And again, I'm going to rename some of these just to make it a little bit easier to see. No large gifts. And let me rename the condition as well. If you have at least 1 large gift. All right, any questions so far with what we did?
Let's say we didn't want to have an email come through, we just leave it blank and
Just leave it blank, yeah. Yeah, so you wouldn't have to put anything into the if no, it's not required to have any actions in there. If no large gifts came in, don't do anything, just leave it blank. If you do, and we'll talk about this more because we've got other points of this flow where we're going to be using emails. Again, notice here's some additional features that you can have within the Outlook action. So who is it being sent as or sent on behalf of? Again, your CC and BCC. You can add attachments in here. You can set a different reply to address. You can change the importance level if you want to. So just a lot of different options that you can do when you set up your emails. I should probably put in a to address too. So I'm just going to use my email address on here. So I'm just going to put my name. So that way any of these notifications are at least coming to me for now. And then once I've tested it, make sure everything works. At that point, I can go in and change that email address. Another good example of a place where you might want to use a variable. So at the very top, you could set up a variable of the email address of the recipient who's getting notified. And that way you can just change that email address in one place rather than changing it throughout the flow. Does that make sense? All right. So let's get into the fun stuff. I'm going to collapse the if no column just to give my screen a little bit more real estate. And now we go into the if yes column, which is where all the magic happens. This is where all the fun stuff happens. So if there's at least 1 large gift, what I want to do is I want to look at each of those gifts and pull information from Raiser's Edge about each of those gifts. So things like who the donor is, what funds did they give to, what's the gift amount, what appeal did it go to? All of those things might be necessary to build into our digest if that's something that we want to show in our email notification. So at this stage, I am going to add a couple actions. I want to get the gift details, the nitty-gritty gift details for each individual gift that is in that list. So to do that, I'm adding an action and I'm going to type in Blackbaud so I can go back into the Raiser's Edge connector here. And then at this point, I'm going to search for get gift because I want to now that I have the list of gifts, I want to drill into each individual gift and get some detail behind those gifts. So I'm going to say get a gift. Now notice what happens here, because this is really important. When I go under gift ID and I click within that field there, I want to pull from that list. And if I look at the dynamic content, one of those fields is the system record ID of the gift. Notice that's what it's looking for when it's asking me for the gift ID. So I'm taking the gift ID from the list, the pull that we did in the previous step, and I'm populating that field with the gift ID. Again, system record ID is what we want to use because that's what Power Automate uses every time you do a call to get a gift or to get a constituent. Always has to be the system record ID. So that's what it says here. I'm going to go ahead and click on it. And something crazy just happened. It just added a loop automatically for me. The reason why it did that is because it understands that when I get a gift and I put in the gift ID from the list, that it is going to have to iterate through each of those gifts within the list. So that's why it has apply to each in here. And again, I like to rename this to say, for each gift returned from today's gift list, we want to get the gift information. We probably also want to get the constituent information of the donor as well. So now I'm in a loop. I am looking at each individual gift. I'm getting the gift information. I also want to get constituent information. So within this loop, I'm going to add another action from the Blackbaud connector. I'm going to say, instead of get a gift, I want get constituent. I want to get the donor's information so we can pull back their name and maybe other information about the donor. So I'm going to say get a constituent. And then the constituent ID, we can get either from the list, or since we said get a gift in the step right before this, that get a gift is also going to return the constituent ID or the donor's ID. So I'm going to use it right here. And now, when we're starting to build out our email content, our digest, we can pull out gift information, constituent information, all of that at the same time. And to do that, basically what I'm going to do is I'm going to populate that variable that we had set up way at the beginning. So this digest variable is where we're going to start populating what that's going to look like, what that content's going to look like that we're going to be sending via email. So I'm going to add one more action down here. And to populate that variable, I want to append more information every time we loop through and look at each gift item within our list. So to do this, I'm going to search for the append action, and it's under variable because we've already started our array. I want to append to that array. Basically, every time we loop through, we're adding more information to our digest. So I'm going to say append to the array variable. It's going to ask which variable. The gift digest is the only array variable that we have, so that's the one I'm going to use. And then here's where we start including the various fields that we might want to display in our email digest. So to do this, it requires a little bit of, I mean, you can call it code, but it's, again, anything in Power Automate is very, very low code. So this is a structure called JSON, JSON, and it requires an open curly brace. And then I'm going to leave some space and then do a close curly brace. And in between those curly braces is where I can define what fields I want to include in my digest. So things like the donor's name, things like the gift amount, the gift date, all of those fields can be included because we, in the previous two steps, we asked Raiser's Edge to give us the donor's information and to give us the gift information. So we can now put that into our digest variable. Does that make sense so far? All right, so what are the fields that we want? I'm going to put in quotes the name of the field, or what I'm going to be calling it within our digest. I'm going to call this one donor. I can call it name or whatever. And it has to be in quotes. And then I'm going to use a colon. And what does that translate to in Raiser's Edge speak? it's the constituent name, right? So again, this has to be in quotes as well. And I have to search under get a constituent because I want the constituents information. I got to search for their name. I've got first name, I've got last name. I keep scrolling. There's also a name field that I can pull. So I'm going to use that. And if I just click on it, notice it inserts it into my append action here. And then I'm going to close the quotation and put a comma because I've got more fields I want to add. Next field might be amount. That in quotes, and then what does that translate in Raiser's Edge speak? I'm going to open up another quotation. And then again, the search is your friend up here at the top. If I start typing in amount, there's apparently some amount fields under the constituent, but we actually want the amount of the gift. So I want it from, not from the gift list, but I actually want it from where we said get a gift, because I want it from that specific gift that we're currently adding into this variable. So under get a gift, you've got amount value. There's some UK options here for the gift date value. If you do any sort of things with splits, you can also get the split value if you wanted to. I'm just going to get the amount value. Right? And then I'm going to close my quote. And then I'm just going to add one more field because we could be doing this all day. I'm going to add one more field for gift date. And then we'll add to this a little bit later. So I put gift date in quotes. I'm going to put a colon. I'm going to put another quotation. And then I'm going to do a search for date. And then again, it's under get a gift. I have to make sure we're in the get a gift section. I want the gift date, the date of the gift. So it's this one right here. And then I'm going to close the quotations. Since I'm not adding anything else at this point, I'm not going to put another comma at the end of this line. Basically closing it out with that curly brace, and we should be good to go. All right, so this is kind of the format that you want to use when you're building out your digest. What are the fields, and what are you going to be calling them? And then where is that data coming from in Raiser's Edge? Pulling it from this dynamic content, making sure that you're mapping to the right places.
How much harder would it be? You know how when you get those emails from Blackbaud that have links to the gifts to add that? We're
going to do that.
Oh, okay.
Hopefully, if we've got time towards the end of this. So I like to start easy and then get harder. So I want to make sure that this works, first of all. And then once I get this working, it's like, okay, my next version of this is going to be to add links. And I'm also going to add funds because I might want funds to be included in here. And some of those might be split funds. So we have to make sure that we accommodate for that. So I'm going to start easy and then I'm going to build up. And then hopefully we'll get to a place where we can include links as well. All right, so again, keep in mind I'm still in this this loop here. So notice if I minimize it, it all goes away. If I want to see what's in that loop, I can open it back up just by clicking on the header. And I see that we've got 3 steps that we're doing within each loop, each iteration where we're looking at each gift of that list. We're getting the gift details, we're getting the constituent or the donor details, and then we're putting those details into the array variable and adding it each time it finds a gift that meets that criteria. So this might be happening 3 times. If you got 10 large gifts that day, it's going to iterate or loop through this 10 times. So every item that's in your gift list, it's going to go through, get the gift information for that gift, get the constituent information for that gift, and then add that to the variable. And again, I might just rename this add variable. All right. So once it's finished going through all of that, I'm not going to add any more actions within the loop. So to make it easier, I like to close the loop once I'm done working in it so that I don't accidentally or inadvertently add more stuff to the loop than I want it to. But once that loop is complete, it's gone through, it's looked at all 3 GIFs that are in my gift list, I want to make this readable for an email. So I can't just paste that array into the email content. I want to make it more look like a table, right? An actual HTML table. So there's actually an action that I can do that formats this array into a really nice HTML table. So I'm going to do a search for that. I forget what it's called. I think it's just called HTML table. And I believe it lives under data operation. So let me click on data operation here. And there it is, create HTML table. See, it's the 3rd one down under data operation. I'm going to click on that. And it's going to ask me, where am I creating this table from? I'm going to take under dynamic content, I'm going to take that gift digest variable that we've been working on and just use that to create a nice looking HTML table. And that's really all you need at this point. Once we've gotten our digest and all the information that we need, let's go ahead and I'm going to do the Outlook connector again. And now that I'm in Outlook 365, I'm going to send an email. Again, I'm just going to send it to myself for now, just to make sure it works. Trevor Kelly. And then the subject could be something like, there were, and I'm actually going to take that count. Remember, we used that count in the condition where we said pull today's gifts. I'm going to take that count and actually put that in the subject line. There were X number of large gifts that came in today. There were 3 large gifts today. Right, so using that count in the actual email body makes it easy so that before I even open up the email, I know there were 3, there were 10, there were 20 large gifts that came in today. And then when I go into the body of the email, this is where you can take that HTML table. And notice here also that you've got this WYSIWYG editor for the email and this little code view icon at the end. If I switch to code view, you can more easily add that HTML table within here, within that HTML code, because it is going to have some HTML elements that we want to make sure look good when it actually spits it out. So I just usually switch over to HTML view or that code view, and then I put the output in between that P tag or that paragraph tag so that it looks good. And one more thing that I'll do too, I'm going to copy this whole thing. And just so that you guys see what I'm seeing, I'm also going to post this in Teams. So I'm going to go to Teams. And I am going to post a message, here it is, to our Teams channel. So that way, if you're not following along in your own environment and you want to see what this looks like, I'm going to post it to our, what is it called? Microsoft Power Platform Accelerator. I'm going to put it in the April 2021 class team. And again, I'm going to use that code view, paste the code in there. And that way you're seeing exactly what I'm seeing without me having to open up my email and sharing that. Questions? Should we see if it works? Let me save this. Wait for that to finish saving. It says it's ready to go. So now I'm going to go ahead and click the test option in the upper right. It's going to ask you for a couple things here. This automatically is a great little shortcut. If you ran it recently, and you want to just use the inputs from the previous run. So let's say you don't want it to go out and wait for something to happen. This is especially important if, let's say, you're triggering an action to happen based off of a form submission. If you don't want to fill out that form all over again to do your test, you could just take the previous form submission. So there's some good shortcuts that you can take if you use automatically. Since we haven't run this yet, I have to run it manually. So I'm going to click manually and then hit test. It's going to make sure that I am connected to everything that I've connected to. So if I click review connections, it's going to make sure that I am connected to Raiser's Edge NXT. Here's all the actions that it's pulling from, that I'm connected to my Outlook account, and then I'm connected to Teams, because that last step that I added was through Teams. So if you're not already logged in, it's going to prompt you to log in at this stage. Luckily, I am already logged into all 3 of those items, so I can go back. And I'm going to run the flow. All right, so I'm going to hit done. It's going to take me to this, this run screen. So it's going to walk through every step that it did. And it's going to give me green check marks, which is a good sign, that says that it successfully completed each of these actions. It was able to initialize the variable. Just got an email alert. Sounds like the email might have worked. It was able to pull today's gifts. It said it was able to evaluate this condition that says, hey, do we have at least one large gift? Notice that it says it's true, that there is either one or more large gifts. So it takes me down this branch, and notice that the if no, it didn't do this. It did not do this no large gift notification because there was a large gift, or at least one. And then I've got my loop that it went through. Took 5 seconds to do that loop. It created my HTML table, sent the email, and it looks like it also posted something to Teams. We've got Sarah, Trevor, and Tom. Their gift amounts all seem to be over $1,000, and the gift date is today. So that matches with what we were expecting from this list. But you're probably getting back to your question, how do we make this better now? Because notice that the gift date looks a little weird. The gift amount doesn't have the currency symbol, and none of this is linkable. And we might want to also add a fund column to this digest. So let's make this better. This was a great first pass. I'm thrilled that I didn't get any errors, but I want to make this do a little bit more than what we just did. So I can go back to the edit option from this screen. So after I saw all my green check marks, I'm happy with this as a first draft. I can go back to edit and add to this. So let's do that. And again, since I think I labeled almost everything on here, hopefully it'll be easy for me to figure out what I need to do to add certain things in here. So the first thing I want to do is I want to look at this loop where we're actually generating content for each of those GIFs. And if I look at this add to our digest variable, I'm not thrilled with the way that the amount came back with that data, because we're basically just pulling over that, that number without any sort of formatting. So maybe I don't want to include the amount value directly from Raiser's Edge. Maybe I want to do something with that first. So I'm going to make another step happen before I go to this add to our digest variable. I'm going to add another step in between. I'm going to click that plus sign here and say, let's add another action. And one of the things that I was able to discover is that there is a number formatting action that we can use. So if I type in number format, notice that there's a number function area, and I want to format that number. So I'm going to click on format number. It's going to ask me what number am I going to format. And if I click on this, it's going to take me over to that dynamic content again. And I'm going to search for that amount value again. Here it is. Actually, I want it from where we say get a gift. So when we get a gift, it returns the amount value. I want to take that monetary value and I want to format it as a currency. So if I click this drop down under format, notice that there's a currency option. You can change the country code if you wanted to. So if you wanted the euro symbol to appear or anything like that, or the British pound, you can do that. But I can leave it as dollar, or I can change it to US. I'm also going to rename this real quick. I'm going to call this make gift amount into a currency format. So that's what that's going to do. And then when we go back into our variable, rather than outputting the raw data from Raiser's Edge, I'm going to get rid of this amount value right here. And instead, let me put my cursor right back in there. Instead, I'm going to take that formatted number from where we made that gift amount into a currency format, take the output of that formatted number, and that's going to give it a currency symbol, give it a comma if it's over $1,000, which it should, give it that decimal symbol. All of that should be done for us. All right, the other thing I didn't like was the date. I didn't like how the date came out because it was a standard date format. That's how Raiser's Edge stores dates, with the year, the month, the day, and then the timestamp on it. So rather than displaying it that way, again, I'm going to get rid of that right from here. And unfortunately, there's not a date format action that we can use. So I'm going to have to write an expression. I'm going to have to write, think of it in terms of like an Excel formula. And we've been using this dynamic content column, but I'm going to switch over to the expression column. And I am going to type in a formula for formatting date and time. I start typing in format. Notice that there's a format date time option. And then I'm going to open parentheses. And it's going to ask me, what is the timestamp that we're trying to format? I can go back to my dynamic content and find, if I scroll down far enough, I should be able to find the gift date. I believe it's right here. Yeah. Find that gift date right here. So it's going to put that into my formula. And then I'm going to put a comma after the gift date and say how I want it to be formatted. And you use single quotes for this. I'm going to type in capital MM for month, lowercase dd for day, and 4 Ys for year. And that's just a formatting option. I had to Google this 20 times before I figured out how to do it. I'll put this in the chat, this formula. But that format date time, we're taking the gift date from the dynamic content and then formatting it with the month, day, year format. So if I click OK here, notice it puts that formula expression in between the quotes there instead of the gift date. So let me just put that in the chat so that everyone has that. You can see exactly what I did. And that is now hopefully a little bit better. Before I get too crazy and too carried away with that, let me just see if those two changes made anything better. Hopefully what it did was it formatted the currency and hopefully it formatted the date. Let me test it out now that I've saved it. I'm going to test it manually again. It's going to make sure that I'm connected still, and then I'm going to run the flow. We'll see if there's anything wrong with this. Looks like so far I've got green check marks. I am waiting for this loop to finish. Looks like it ran. And then I am going to check my email to see if it came out any better. And if you look within the April 2021 class, Again, I've sent you guys so you can see what it looks like as well. This looks a little bit better than what we got the first time. So it looks like we're doing well so far. Let's make this a little bit more complex based on being able to link. So if I click on Sarah's name, maybe I want to go directly to her record. Or if I click on the gift amount, maybe that's going to take me directly to the gift record. So how would we do that? Adding linking. And then let's see if we can also carve out some time to do funds. And then I want to make sure that everyone can import too. All right, so I'm going to go back to my edit, and where I want to add my links, again, all the magic kind of happens in this one action where we're adding to our digest variable. I have to wrap the name in some HTML code in order to make the name field linkable. So within this single quote where we're actually pulling the constituent's name, I also want to include some HTML code to make that name linkable. So within the quote, I'm going to add an A tag, which is your link tag in HTML speak, href, and I'm going to say equals http nxt.blackbaud.com/constituents/ and I need the ID in order to complete this URL structure. So I'm basically taking it to the constituent record, which has their ID within the URL. It's renxt.blackbaud.com/constituents/275 would be my system record ID of Trevor Kelly. So how do we get the constituent system record ID? I have to go back into my dynamic content, and I'm just going to do a search on ID here. And there's lots of IDs within the system. I don't want to take the ID from today's gifts. I want to get it from the constituent. So I'm going to keep going down and see if I can find, here it is, get a constituent. Let me get their system record ID, this first field here. And notice that pops it in there. So now the link is going to go to renxt.blackbaud.com/constituents/ whatever their ID is. And again, since I'm speaking in HTML code, I have to close that tag before we get to the output field, which is just what the name is. And then I also have to close out the A tag after we've made the name linkable. So the only thing I want to make linkable to point it to the constituent record is the name field. So I have to encapsulate that in between that A tag. So where is it linking to? What's the output? And then close the tag so that nothing else within the grid gets linked to that constituent record. I'm going to do the same thing for the gift amount. So again, I'm going to make the currency, that formatted number, I'm going to make this linkable so that when they click on the gift amount, it takes them to the gift record, not the constituent record. I want to take them to the gift record when they click on that. So I am going to do another ahref. This time I'm going to make it go to renxt.blackbaud.com/gifts, not constituents, because I'm taking them to the gift record. And then I need to pull in the gift ID here after that slash. So renxt.blackbaud.com/gifts/2775 might be a specific gift ID or gift URL that takes me to a specific gift record. So I already have my dynamic content open. I don't want to pull the ID from the constituent. So if I keep scrolling, notice that I'm under the Get a Gift area. And under Get a Gift, I can get the system record ID of the gift. So I'm going to take that. And unfortunately, it didn't put it in the right place. So let me close that because I put it at the end of my Power Automate likes to put things in random places. Let me close that and make sure my cursor's in the right place. I want my cursor to be right here after that slash in the URL. And let me click on the ID again under dynamic content. There it goes. And then let me close that. We have the formatted number, and then before we close out the quote here, I want to make sure we close out the A tag as well. So now only the formatted number, that gift amount, is going to be clickable. And so I apologize because there's one other step we have to do in order to make this work. And that step is to clean up any weird characters that this create HTML table does. For whatever reason, and I don't understand why, it adds additional characters when you have HTML already within your array variable. And so after it creates that HTML table, I have to go in and clean up those characters. So I'm going to add another action. And to clean it up, I'm going to do a compose action. So this compose action allows me to put in an expression that will clean up whatever extra characters the step above has done with this create HTML table. And this expression, I am going to put it into the chat. I had to write it down myself because I had to Google this to figure out what was actually going on. It's basically a replace expression. So I am replacing in the step above where we created the HTML table, those weird characters that it adds. It adds this ampersand LT for the less than sign. So I want to make sure I put it back to the open bracket. And then it adds an ampersand GT for the greater than sign. So I replace that with the close bracket that it should be for the HTML code that we added. So let me put that in the chat in case you forget what that is. What I just did. Basically replacing two replaces because we're replacing the open bracket and we're replacing the close bracket, the greater than sign and the less than sign, and making sure that that works. So hopefully that will fix it. And then I'm just going to say, I'm going to rename this to say cleaned up table. And now that I've renamed it, I want to make sure that I'm using that in my email. So instead of the output, delete that and then take the output from the cleaned up table instead. Otherwise, it's going to take the messy one from the step above. And I'll do the same thing in here as well. If I can find where it went. Here it is, the output from the cleaned up table. Let me save this and see if this works. Do another test here. And I'll just sit here and watch it do its thing and cross my fingers that looks like I got an email, which is a good sign. Got all green check marks, which is a good sign. So let me go into my email and see what it looks like. Maybe I didn't get it yet.
Well, your Teams was successful. We see the links on the constituent names and the gifts. Yes.
Awesome. 147. This is the one. There it is. So if I click on Sarah Dean, click on her name, opens up her record, which is 18458. There she is. If I click on her amount, that 1,500, it opens up Sarah Dean, hopefully Sarah Dean's gift for $1,500 that she gave today. All right, I'm going to do one more thing. oops, wrong one. I want to add the fund. And the reason why I want to do this is because this has been a pain point in the past, because the way that Raiser's Edge is structured is that you can have multiple funds for a single gift. And anytime I hear that you can have multi-values or multiple of anything for one record, means in my head I have to build another loop. We have to iterate basically through each of those fund records in order to display information about the fund. So let me go back to my edit screen. And just because I've done this before, I know I'm going to have a variable to store the fund name. So I'm going to add, again, I like to put my variables at the very top. I'm going to add another variable to initialize. So let me find the initialize variable action. And I'm going to call this the fund name, or fund description, I think is what it is in Raiser's Edge. And this is going to be a string. So it's blank right now because we haven't done anything yet at this stage. All I'm doing is I am setting up a placeholder for our fund variable. That as we're iterating through each of those fund records, we can start to compile what that fund description is going to look like when we actually display it. All right, so we've done that. We've got fund name. Now when I go into my loop for each of today's gifts, I actually want a third action to call to Raiser's Edge, because we have the gift information, we've got the constituent information, we now need the fund information. So I'm going to add another step, add an action, and I'm going to go to Blackbaud Raiser's Edge. And instead of saying get a gift or get a constituent, I want to get the fund. So I'm going to say get fund. Notice that there is a get a fund action. I'm going to select that. And then again, just like it did for constituents and gifts, it's asking me for the system record ID of the fund to get. And when I click on this, I have to pass it the fund ID that we're getting from the gift. So we got the gift information in this step right up here. I have to pass that fund ID. Let me see if I can find it in my dynamic content. Get a constituent. Lots of constituent fields we can get, but it's not under constituent, it's under get a gift. So I'm going to keep scrolling. Here's the gifts list, pull today's gifts. I don't want that. I actually want the get a gift. So I'm going to keep scrolling until I find, did I miss it? Here it is. Oop. So get a gift. So there's the system record ID of the gift. That is not what we want. We want to get the fund ID. So I'm going to keep scrolling through this gift record under get a gift to see if I can find my fund ID. All right. So we actually found it. Gift splits fund ID. You're probably wondering, what is this gift splits? Fund ID lives under the gift splits area. The reason why is because it is built to handle split giving. If you do split gifts at your organization, it allows you to pull out those funds from each of those splits. So this is the area, the actual field that we want. And again, when I click on this, pay close attention to what happens over on the left side of the screen. I'm going to click on gift splits fund ID. Notice what happens here. We have another apply to each. Reason why? We have to go through each of those fund splits and return the fund information for each of those funds that might be associated with this one gift. So I'm going to rename this so it's a little bit more clear. Iterate through each fund on the gift, right? we're getting the fund. For each of those funds, I'm going to do something similar that we did down here where we added to our digest. I want to add to that text variable that we called fund description and just make sure that we've got all of the fund descriptions for all of the funds that are going to be on this gift. So I'm going to add an action here and say append to a variable. And we didn't make this an array variable, we made it a string variable, if I remember correctly, up at the very top. And that string variable was called fund name. And then the value of this is going to be, it's under get a fund. I think we just call it fund description or description, the display name of the fund. So I'm going to use that. And then here's the really important part, especially if you're using split gifts at your organization. You probably want some sort of spacing or delimiter to happen in between each fund. Otherwise, it's just going to put the fund names basically right on top of each other. So put a couple spaces in there in between just to make sure that as we're adding those fund names, we can easily see what that looks like for each of them. So I put a little space in there. Hopefully that'll work. And now that I'm done with that loop for each fund, I'm going to close that out, make it a little bit easier to see. It's gone through that. Now I'm going to go to my digest and add the fund information. So let me add a comma after after the gift date, and let me add fund. Maybe I'll just call it funds. There could be more than one. Put a colon, and then I'm going to insert my variable there of fund name, because that's going to include all the funds that we've iterated on in that step above. So if there's 3 funds, this will display fund A, fund B, fund C. If there's 8 funds, it's going to say fund A, fund B, fund C, etc. So it'll keep going and showing all of that within a single line. That's basically what this fund name variable does. It basically collects the fund description of every fund that's associated with this one gift. I'm going to do one other thing before I close out this loop. So right now I'm in the gift loop here. So for each gift, I'm basically putting together that digest. Once I've put together the digest for this one gift, before I go on to the next gift, I need to clear out that fund variable. I need to make it go back to null, to empty, because otherwise it's going to take the funds from the gift before and start appending those funds on there as well. So to do that, I can set the variable. I'm going to do a search for set variable. I'm going to find that fund name. And if I want to reset it back to an empty value, I'm going to go to an expression over on the right-hand side. I'm just going to type in null. So that nullifies any values that are in that variable before it goes to the next gift. Otherwise, that's just going to get longer and longer and longer every time that we run this, every time it goes through a new gift. So I am going to rename this so it's more clear. Nullify the fund variable before going to next gift. All right, I'm going to save this and let's test it one more time to see if this gives us, actually I'm going to do one other thing. In my email, and I'll do it for the other area as well, I'm going to say something like, please see your gift list below. You can manage those gifts in NXT. And I'm actually going to create a link here where it says manage those gifts in NXT. I like to actually give them access to this list that we created. So if they need to go in and look at the gift details or just see it in a within the Raiser's Edge that they've got that option. So if I click share here, I can copy this link, and then I'm going to put it into my flow. So where's my link icon? The link target is going to be the actual link to the list. Click add. Right, and I could do the same thing in here if I wanted to. Actually, I'll hold off on that for now. So let me just save this real quick. And let's see if we can test it in the last minute that we have together. Be super disappointed if this doesn't work. Got green check marks so far. It's going through and looping through all those GIFs. All right, so 2 p.m. It says that there were 3 large GIFs today. I've got my funds, and again, these are, I believe some of these are split GIFs, so they should be split GIFs. So Sarah Dean gave to the annual fund, capital projects, and the endowed scholarship. If I were to look at her $1,500 gift, that seems to jive with what I'm actually seeing here in the details. So that looks like that it worked. I've got one more really important thing. I know we're a minute over, but since I created this on a recurrence, it's on right now. So this is going to run again at 11 p.m. tonight. If you get tired of getting these notifications, you can go into the details of the flow. You can go to My Flows, access the details, and turn it off. There's a turn off option. You probably want to turn it off if this is something that you're just doing for testing, and you can turn it back on whenever you're ready to go. So just wanted to make sure that everyone was aware of that. Thank you for your time. Thank you for your patience. I will get that out within the next few minutes here. So enjoy the rest of your week and your weekend, and we'll talk next week.